I didn't go to my parents' anniversary dinner expecting silence to do what it did. I went because my aunt called twice in 1 week, which she only does when something is already breaking. I went because 30 years of marriage felt like the kind of occasion that outlasted grudges, even the ones with receipts. And I went because somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew that the man my sister was bringing, the one she'd been describing for 4 months in texts I read but rarely answered, I knew his name from somewhere that had nothing to do with family. I walked in wearing the gray blazer I wear to depositions. Not for intimidation, for accuracy. My mother saw me near the coat closet and her expression moved through 3 things in 1 second: surprise, calculation, and the particular brand of disappointment she reserved for inconveniences that refused to stay inconvenient. "You actually came," she said, not warmly, like a landlord who wasn't expecting the tenant back. My father crossed the room to hug me, and his arms were genuine even if his timing was 30 years too late. "You look good," he said quietly. I told him so did he. We were both lying a little, and we both knew it, and somehow that made it the most honest exchange we'd managed in a decade. My sister Lily found me near the appetizer table. She was luminous in the way people are when they've never had to fight for anything easy in her body, unguarded in her smile. She hugged me without hesitation. "You came," she said, and unlike my mother, she meant it as relief. "I came," I said. "He's here," she told me, eyes bright. "Marcus. I really want you to meet him." I already knew that. I'd driven 90 minutes knowing that. Marcus Hale was standing near the fireplace holding a glass of something amber, talking to my uncle with the relaxed authority of a man accustomed to rooms moving around him. He was handsome in an assembled way, good suit, practiced laugh, the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no by anyone who mattered. Lily touched his arm and he turned, and his smile widened for her the way smiles do when they're real. Then she said my name, my full name, including my title, and Marcus Hale went still in a way that had nothing to do with manners. He recovered in under 2 seconds. Most people wouldn't have caught it. But I spent 8 years learning to read the moment a person realizes the room has changed. The slight jaw tightening, the recalibration behind the eyes, the smile that continues half a beat after the warmth has already left it. "It's great to finally meet you," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm and deliberate, the grip of someone who has just understood that the woman in front of him is not simply his fiancé's estranged older sister. "Likewise," I said, and I meant it differently than he heard it. You can't understand that dinner until you understand what the years before it cost. I was 19 when my parents explained, without quite explaining, that my future was an expense they had already decided not to carry. It happened at the kitchen table in the house on Delwood Avenue, the one with the yellow curtains and the smell of coffee that never fully left the walls. I had my acceptance letter. I had the financial aid breakdown. I had a highlighter and a notepad where I'd already mapped out what I could cover with loans and what I needed from them. My mother listened with the expression she used for conversations she'd already mentally filed. When I finished, she folded her hands on the table. "We're not in a position for that right now," she said. I asked what position they were in. She looked at the ceiling briefly, which was her tell. "Your father and I have to think about retirement, about stability. You're smart, you'll find a way." My father was at the stove. He didn't turn around. He cleared his throat and said, "There are loans for this kind of thing." Then he moved the skillet to the back burner like punctuation. 3 weeks later, Lily came home from her junior year school trip to Costa Rica with a tan and a wish list. Within the month, she had a car. Not a necessity, she was 16 and lived 4 blocks from school, but a car, because she had asked for one with the ease of someone who had never been told to find a way. I watched my mother hand her the keys. I watched my father take a photo of Lily behind the wheel. I was standing in the kitchen doorway in the uniform I wore to my second job, the one at the hotel front desk that paid $11 an hour, and no one asked if I was tired. That was the year I understood that fairness in our house wasn't a principle. It was a budget line that only applied to one of us. I got through my first year on loans, weekend shifts, and the particular discipline that comes from having no backup. I ate the same 4 dinners in rotation. I studied in the break room of the grocery store where I worked closing shifts on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I learned what it felt like to be tired in a way that lives behind your eyes. Sophomore year, I declared accounting, which surprised people who expected something softer from me. Accounting suited me because it is honest in a way people aren't. Numbers don't protect anyone, they record what actually happened. Junior year, I applied for an internship with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division on a long shot. Got an interview. Drove 4 hours in a car that needed a new alternator. Sat across from a supervisory special agent named Calloway, who had the energy of someone who had heard every story twice and only found the true ones interesting. He asked me why I wanted to investigate financial crimes. I told him the truth. Because money is where people hide what they really believe, and I think the truth should be findable. He studied me for a long moment. Then, he slid a stack of practice scenario documents across the table. "Walk me through this," he said. I got the internship, then the job offer, then the years. 8 years in federal financial crimes work changes the texture of how you see things. You stop noticing the performance and start noticing the structure underneath it. You learn that most fraud doesn't look like theft. It looks like paperwork. It looks like forms signed under small misunderstandings that happen to benefit one party at another's expense. It looks like money moving quietly through channels designed to look ordinary. By the time I was 31, I was a senior investigator on commercial real estate fraud cases. My supervisor, Director Chen, was a woman who communicated almost entirely in deadlines and didn't waste words on anything she couldn't document. She told me once, early on, that the job was about patience, not cleverness, not instinct, patience, and the willingness to follow a number wherever it led. I followed numbers for 8 years. One of them led to a name. Marcus Hale had come across my desk 7 months before the anniversary dinner, not as a target, as a peripheral entity in a broader investigation. His development company, Hale Capital Group, had been flagged during a routine audit of a commercial lending institution. Not criminal, not yet, but the kind of irregular that demands attention when you're paying attention the right way. The flag involved a series of construction loan disbursements tied to properties that had been appraised above market in a way that was technically defensible and structurally suspicious. The pattern was familiar, not evidence, a pattern. When Lily texted me 2 months later with a photo of Marcus's smile and the words "I think he might be the one," I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time. Then I went to Director Chen the next morning and disclosed the familial connection before she heard it from anyone else. She looked at me over her reading glasses. "You're already off anything Hale adjacent?" "I requested formal separation yesterday," I said. "It's documented." She nodded once. "Good. Keep it that way." I kept it that way. But I accepted the dinner invitation because the situation wasn't personal. It was real. And I had learned, through 8 years of following numbers, that real situations don't improve by being ignored. Marcus excused himself to get a drink refill 12 minutes after we were introduced. He came back 2 minutes later with slightly steadier hands and the conversational ease of someone who had made a decision about how to play this. He was good. He asked me thoughtful questions about my work. He steered conversations away from anything specific with the practiced grace of a man who had navigated careful rooms before. My mother orbited the evening in high performance. She had rearranged the dining room with fresh flowers and the good china she usually saved for guests she wanted to impress rather than family she had promised to celebrate. She laughed a half-beat louder than usual. She touched my father's arm for the camera and looked genuinely warm for the photos in a way that required real skill. Dinner was served. I sat across from Lily, who was softer than I remembered, less the golden child performing for approval, and more a woman who had started to notice things. She asked about my work carefully, the way people ask when they're afraid of the answer. I told her what I could, which wasn't much, and she nodded like that made sense. Halfway through the main course, my mother said it. She was telling a story to Marcus about the family, and she reached the part about me, and she said, "She was always the independent one. Left for college, barely called home. Some people just aren't built for staying." There was scattered, polite laughter. My father looked at his plate. Lily's fork stopped moving. Marcus's eyes moved to me, and I watched him understand, in real time, that there was a version of this family story that his fiancé had never told him, that the independent one sitting across from him was not estranged by temperament, that the distance had an origin, and the origin had documentation. He didn't laugh with the table. My mother noticed. Her smile held, but her eyes moved to him with a question. "Maggie," Marcus said, using my mother's name with a careful deliberateness. "What do you mean she left?" "A beat. She went to college," my mother said smoothly. "And Just sort of made her own path. You didn't support her? The table went quiet in the specific way it does when someone has broken the choreography everyone agreed to follow. My father set down his fork. Lily looked at Marcus, then at me, with the expression of someone who has just realized the ground under the dinner table is less solid than it appeared. We were always supportive, my mother said. Her tone had shifted into the register she used for managing inconveniences. We had limitations, like any family. You bought me a car, Lily said, very quietly. Not accusing, observing, like she was saying it out loud for the first time to hear what it sounded like. Silence. Marcus looked at me. I hadn't said anything. I had not moved to cause this. I had answered questions honestly, and let the architecture of the evening do what architecture does when it's built on the wrong foundation. I'd like to show you something, I said, and I reached into my blazer. My father stiffened. My mother straightened. Marcus went very still. I placed an envelope on the table. Slim, official-looking. I watched their faces move through several things at once. What is that? My mother asked. My financial aid adjustment from sophomore year, I said. A pause. That's ancient history, my mother said. It's active documentation, I replied. Because student loan accounts don't close when you stop paying attention to them. They keep records. I slid the first page across to my father. He looked at it. His face changed. I don't understand what we're looking at, Lily said carefully. Your sister's aid eligibility was recalculated her sophomore year, Marcus said quietly, still looking at me. Based on a reported change in parental contribution. My mother's eyes snapped to him. I work in finance, Maggie, he said, and his voice had lost its dinner party texture entirely. I know what that form means. Lily stared at the page. What change? My father said nothing. Dad. Lily's voice had a new edge. What change in parental contribution? My father's hand moved toward the paper and stopped. There may have been a miscommunication with the university, he said. Your mother handled those things. I did not handle, my mother started. You redirected, I said. The word landed without heat, just accuracy. My mother looked at me. In 31 years, I had seen her face do many things. Perform warmth, perform injury, perform reasonableness. What it did now was different. It flinched. You had 2 children enrolled in expensive things simultaneously, I continued. I was in college. Lily's private school tuition had gone up. You reported to my university that your financial contribution would remain consistent, then reduced it without notifying me, which shifted a portion of my aid category from grant to loan. I found out during a financial aid audit 3 years ago when I was clearing my own records. Lily whispered, How much? $11,400, I said. Over 2 semesters. The number sat on the table like something solid. My father covered his mouth with his hand. My mother's posture had not changed, but something behind her eyes had shifted into something I had never seen there before. The specific look of a person whose version of a story has just run out of room. Marcus looked at Lily. Did you know about this? No, she said immediately. Then, quieter. No. He believed her. I did too. This is not what it looks like, my mother said. Her voice had taken on the quality of someone fighting a current. We had pressures you didn't understand. We were managing. We made the best decisions we could. For Lily, Marcus said. Not cruelly. Precisely. My mother turned to him with the look she used for people who had overstepped. Excuse me. You've known this family for 4 months. Maggie. His voice was quiet and completely flat. I've spent my career reading financial documents. What's in that envelope is not a miscommunication. My mother looked at her husband. My father looked at the table. Lily pushed back her chair slightly, and I watched her do the thing I had needed 8 years to do myself. Hold 2 true things at once. That she had been loved, and that the love had come at someone else's expense without her knowledge. Why are you showing us this now? Lily asked me. I had thought about this answer for the 3 weeks since I RSVP'd. Yes, because you're building something, I said. A life with someone. And I didn't want you building it on a version of this family that was missing a floor. Lily's eyes filled. Not with anger. With something that takes more courage than anger to feel. Marcus cleared his throat. He had the look of a man whose evening had traveled much further from its intended destination than he had planned, and who was nonetheless staying present in a way that told me something real about him. "I need to tell you something," he said to me. He looked at Lily first, then back, about why I recognized your name tonight. My mother frowned. "What are you talking about?" He ignored her. "There's a review connected to a lending audit. I don't know the details. I wasn't supposed to know, but my attorney mentioned a name in a disclosure filing 2 months ago." "Your name." Lily went very still. "I recused myself from anything connected to you professionally," I said. "The same week Lily told me about you." He exhaled slowly. "I know. I found that out last week." My attorney confirmed the case file had been reassigned. He paused. I just needed to say it out loud, because sitting here, after all of this, he stopped. Then, "You could have not told anyone about Lily and me. You could have let it stay complicated." "It would have stayed complicated anyway," I said. "These things don't simplify by being ignored." He nodded. Once. The nod of someone who had spent enough time around financial documentation to know that was true. My mother said, "I want to understand what review you're talking about." "You don't need to understand it," Marcus said to her, and his tone was not unkind and not warm. It was honest. "It has nothing to do with you. He's marrying my daughter, Maggie." My father's voice, when he used it, stopped her. He hadn't spoken in several minutes. He looked at me with the eyes of a man who had been waiting to find the courage for a sentence that had been sitting in his chest for a long time. "What do you want?" I looked at him. "Not the money," he said. "I know it's not the money. What do you actually want?" There was a version of this moment I had imagined over the years that involved a speech, a judgment, a verdict delivered over the wreckage of something grand. That version had always felt satisfying in anticipation and hollow in imagination. Real accountability, I had learned, is quieter than its preview. "I want you to say it was wrong," I said. My father closed his eyes. "It was wrong." My mother made a small sound. "It was wrong," he said again, more firmly. "What we did was wrong. We told ourselves it was practical, and we told ourselves you were strong enough to handle it, and we didn't ask you if you wanted to handle it. We made that decision for you without your consent, and it cost you something real." He opened his eyes. They were wet. "I am sorry." The room held the sentence. Lily was crying quietly, trying not to show it. Marcus was looking at the table with the expression of a man recalibrating several things simultaneously. My mother sat very still. She was not a woman built for apology. She was built for management, for framing, for the kind of survival that requires the story to stay intact. What I saw on her face in that moment was not remorse. It was reckoning, the particular expression of someone who has just understood that the narrative they've maintained for a decade has stopped holding weight. She didn't apologize that night. She looked at her husband, then at her plate, then at some point in the middle distance that was neither of us. She did not speak again through the dessert she had ordered from the bakery downtown, the one with the gold leaf and the perfect rosettes which sat largely untouched. We were in the kitchen after, Lily and I, while our father walked Marcus through something on the back porch and our mother sat in the living room with the look of someone waiting for the evening to be officially over. Lily handed me a glass of water. She leaned against the counter. "I believed them," she said. "When you left. They said you just needed to do things your own way. They said you were always like that. I know. I should have called you. You were 17, then 18, then 20. She looked at me sideways. "I thought you didn't want us." "I needed to go somewhere the rules were the same for everyone," I said. She absorbed that. "Do you think Marcus is okay?" she asked. "I think he's a man who found out something true about his fiancé's family and didn't leave," I said. "That tells you more than the rest of the evening combined." She almost smiled. "Is he in serious trouble?" "He's not my case," I said. "That's the honest answer." She nodded slowly. "But you recused yourself before you even knew who he was to me." "I recused myself the day you texted me his name," I said. "Because that's what the job requires, and because it was the right thing, and because those two things were the same thing for once." Lily looked at me for a long time. Not the way she'd looked at me at the dinner table, measuring the unfamiliar shape of who I'd become. Something older than that. The way you look at a person you loved before you were old enough to understand what love required. "I didn't know," she said. And she didn't mean the documents this time. She meant all of it. The car and the college fund and the years and the distance and the story our parents told that had a floor missing. "I know," I said. "That's not enough from me." "No," I agreed, "but it's somewhere to start." Outside, my father's voice carried through the glass door. low, deliberate, the voice he used when he was choosing words carefully. Marcus answered him once. Then my father said something else and Marcus laughed, a short and genuine sound, and for reasons I couldn't fully explain, that mattered. The investigation completed 6 months later without my involvement or my knowledge until after the fact. Marcus's company had some restructuring to do, some lending relationships to renegotiate, some documentation that required professional correction. No indictment. No headline. Consequences measured in revised agreements and professional reputation, which in his industry meant more than the public version would have. He told Lily everything. She told me that over the phone, 3 weeks after the dinner, calling from an unknown number because she wasn't sure I'd pick up a number she recognized. I picked up. We talked for 40 minutes about things that had nothing to do with our parents, and several things that did. At the end, she said, "I don't know how to do this yet, being your sister the real way." "Neither do I told her. "We can figure it out slowly." "Okay," she said. And the word carried all the weight of someone who finally meant it. My mother called twice in the following months. The first time to tell me the financial matter was being handled through the estate attorney, and I would be contacted directly. Her voice was clipped and professional, the voice of someone completing a transaction rather than making amends. I thanked her and ended the call. The second time, she called without a stated reason. She asked how I was. I told her. She asked about my work in the careful way of someone not asking about the specifics. I answered in the equally careful way of someone not offering them. We talked for 11 minutes about my aunt's garden renovation and a documentary she'd watched about deep-sea geology and whether the restaurant she and my father liked had changed their menu. She didn't apologize. I didn't expect her to. Some people are not built to surrender the version of the story that keeps them whole. And I had spent 8 years learning that accountability and hatred are not the same thing, and that I could require one without sustaining the other. My father wrote me a letter. An actual letter, handwritten, on the stationery he used for Christmas cards. He said he had been thinking about the kitchen table. The specific kitchen table, the Tuesday morning, the acceptance letter with the highlighter marks. He said he remembered watching me lay out those papers and feeling proud of me in a way he hadn't said out loud, and then saying nothing useful when it counted. He said that silence had been its own choice, and that he understood now what it had chosen. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked only if we could occasionally have coffee when I was in town. I wrote back on a Tuesday. I said yes. Lily and Marcus postponed the wedding by 8 months, not indefinitely, not because of damage that couldn't be repaired, but because they decided they wanted to stand in front of people they had been honest with. And honesty, it turned out, required some time to settle into the right shape. They asked me to come. I went. It was smaller than the anniversary dinner, a restored farmhouse with clean lines and good light, no gold leaf desserts, no chandelier performing warmth it didn't mean, just people standing in an honest room making promises they intended to keep. My mother sat in the front row in a navy dress and watched her younger daughter marry a man who had shaken the table at her anniversary dinner and stayed anyway. She did not look at me during the ceremony. Afterward, she walked past me at the edge of the garden and slowed without quite stopping and said, quietly, "You look good in that dress." It was not an apology. It was, maybe, the beginning of something that did not yet have a name. My father hugged me at the end of the evening. His arms were the same as they had been at the anniversary dinner, genuine even when he didn't deserve to be, and he held on a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I came for Lily," I said. "I know." He pulled back and looked at me with the eyes of a man who had done a certain kind of math and arrived at an answer he couldn't undo. "But I'm glad you're here. People sometimes ask if I regret the years, the loans that I'm still paying in smaller amounts than I once was, the nights studying in break rooms, the particular isolation of building something without anyone watching who cared enough to notice. I don't. What I regret is that it took so long for the truth to have a room to stand in. That's not the same thing. What I kept from everything they tried to make a wound, the understanding that self-respect does not require permission, that documentation is its own form of patience, that when you follow a number long enough and honestly enough, it will eventually tell you what it knows. And that silence, when it belongs to you, is not the same thing as absence. Sometimes it is simply the interval before the truth decides it is ready to be heard. If any part of this stayed with you, sit with it. The parts that felt familiar, the parts that cost someone something real. If you believe those stories matter, share this one with someone who might need it. And if you want to hear more about the quiet work of earning dignity on your own terms, stay with us at Silent Bearing.